Previously on Tekken. Now on Tekken.
This pepper beef is too damn spicy!
I want to know if you've also noticed a specific trend within video games, at least in certain franchises. The first game releases with a bang, blowing people away. The second game comes out, upgrading the first game's formula, adding new things and smoothing things out. The third game then releases, perfecting the formula. Then the fourth game comes out. This is where the devs get experimental. Here, I'll give you an example. We have, of course, the iconic Halo trilogy, each game topping one another, building an audience and creating an empire, which is then followed up by not a successor to Halo 3, but Halo 3 ODST, a non-linear, open-world-esque version of a Halo game. I could give plenty of other examples, but today's focus is on another franchise, Tekken. Released in 1994, blowing people away with its 3D fighting mechanics. Tekken 2 released a year later, refining the first game, adding more content, making it an impactful sequel. And in 97, Tekken 3 would hit the arcades, mastering the Tekken formula, creating what was simply known at the time as the greatest fighting game ever. Today though, we're gonna have a look at how in 2001, things would get creative with Tekken 4. Tekken is one of those things that's been in my life for as long as I can remember. I couldn't tell you the first time I played the Tekken game because I was much too young. But I can say with confidence that there hasn't been a year of my life where I haven't played Tekken. Yes, even when I was a baby, I was doing Just Frame Electric with Godfist as a 1-year-old. Tekken 4, however, for pretty much all my life was just another Tekken game. I loved it and all, but Tekken 5 had more modes and the bigger roster, and Tekken 3 was way more nostalgic to me, as that was my first Tekken game. So I never gave Tekken 4 too much attention. I'd say it was a couple years ago where the way I looked at games changed, and it was around this time where I gave Tekken 4 another go, and I'll tell you straight up, something about this game clicked with me. I couldn't really tell you what that was, but today I'll welcome you back to Game Talk, where we talk about games. And it's today where I want to go back to Tekken 4 and put together in words why this game is special. For years, Tekken 4 was considered to be the worst mainline Tekken game, but recently there's been a bit of a resurgence with how people feel about the game. People, including myself, are beginning to recognize Tekken 4 not for what it did wrong, rather for the unique things it did very, very right. The things that, for some reason, have never been seen in Tekken ever again. But before we start, to get in the mood for Tekken, I want you to think about your most beloved family member. Think about what they mean to you. This could be, one of your parents, one of your siblings, a significant other, or even your children. And just imagine you chucking them off a fucking cliff. Yeah, baby! It's Tekken time! Yeah! Ladies and gents, keep those socks on and throw your most beloved family member down a cliff because it's time we have a look at the most creative fighting game ever, Tekken 4. Tekken 4's opening starts with a flashback to Tekken 2's ending. 20 years ago, after the end of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2, Heihachi throws his son, Kazuya's lifeless body, into a pit of a volcano, killing him. In the present day, after the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, Heihachi sends his Tekken 4 soldiers to raid a biotech firm known as G Corporation. Throughout the intro, we see this raid in action, as well as brief glimpses of new characters debuting in this game. The raid eventually comes to a halt, as this happens. Turns out Kazuya didn't die. He was in fact revived by G Corporation and is more badass than ever. What an intro. Great music, great hype, clear and concise plot, and Tekken's first protagonist makes his grand return to the series. After this in the story, Heihachi then announces the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4 to lure Kazuya out of hiding. This immediately takes a spot for the best Tekken intro so far. The other games will just show a montage of all the characters with music playing in the background, and there's nothing wrong with that. Tekken 2 and 3 did that really well. Not Tekken 1 though, fuck, that made me want to drink myself to death. But here they only show what they need to show, glimpses of the new characters and the main story unfolding. You don't need to see anything else. Before we get into gameplay, I want to briefly talk about this game's character select.
Welcome to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4.
It's a very different style to most fighting games. Others usually have a hard-hitting, heavy bass, recognizable rhythm alongside their character select. Hell, even every other Tekken game does that. Not Tekken 4 though. Here we have a very slow, distorted guitar riff with barely any rhythm to it, topped up by an almost robotic voice repeatedly saying the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. Another thing I notice is how great these character portraits are. This is something I remember picking up on as a kid. The Tekken characters have never looked this real. Tekken 4 has a much different tone from the rest of the series, I've noticed. It's not over the top like the other games, quite the contrary in fact. It's much more grounded or grittier. It achieves this tone in various different ways, the character select music being one of them. Every so often I'll come back to this point, to ways this game just feels different. Tekken 4 keeps the core identity of Tekken and keeps what the previous mainline entries succeeded in doing, being the core gameplay. Each face button still controls each limb on your character's body, you still block by pressing the back button on the D-pad. At its core, it's still Tekken, though some tweaks have been made to the general gameplay. First is the movement being slightly more restricted than it was in Tekken 3. This was probably for the best, as Tekken 3's movement system was much too free. It was really impressive and innovative for the time with fully functional 3D mechanics, but most characters had a huge backdash and insanely wide sidesteps, which could dodge basically any attack, and other characters like Eddie having an absolutely pathetic sidestep which couldn't dodge a thing. Moral of the story, don't be Brazilian. So backdashing and sidestepping have been nerfed, making it harder to evade attacks, causing you to block more often and learn what moves can be punished. This creates more of an up-close and personal feel to Tekken 4. Attacks can still be evaded but requires more execution and faster reflexes. On top of this, aerial combos are not only harder to do, but will now scale differently, overall nerfing the combo system. A good and also not so great decision. Tekken 3 had ridiculous combo damage, yes, but it's sad to see aerial combos being more restricted now, because they did make the game more exciting to play and even watch as well. So to sum up the general gameplay of Tekken 4, instead of evasion and launching the opponent for an aerial combo, Tekken 4's competitive nature focuses on poking with long-range attacks and punishment, creating split-second decisions mid-match like choosing safe strings or moves that will make the opponent recover slowly on block. This also adds to the previously mentioned grittier feel to Tekken 4, as it feels much more realistic than previous games, which is an interesting approach for Tekken to say the least. Tekken and realistic sounds just as comparable as healthy diet and Kentucky Fried Chicken.
You ruined our marriage.
I know!
Let's talk about some new features. Alongside side steps, holding up or down will now make you perform a side walk, a feature which fully takes advantage of Tekken's 3D engine. Tekken 4 now removes the ability to jump up and jump backward. I can't come up with a reason as to why. You can still do attacks where you jump up and jump backward, but you just can't jump up and jump backward. Game design. A new mechanic worth mentioning is the position change. Inputting 1+3 and any direction on the D-pad will now cause your character to move the opponent in whichever way you choose. I like this a lot, especially with the introduction of walls. This new mechanic can really shift the pace of gameplay and give you the upper hand if done right. Say if you're backed into a corner and see a brief window after blocking an attack, you can shift them towards the wall and reverse the pressure. As much as I like this new mechanic, it's not all good news. Not only can this allow for broken setups, but it's nearly unavoidable. The break window is ridiculously small, and using it against the wall can guarantee certain strings. It sucks because it's such a neat and immersive mechanic, but one that seems to not be entirely polished. Last thing I want to mention in terms of the new stuff is that before the round starts, you can actually move your character around. Again, a cool idea. In real fights, you'd want to move around and warm up before the ref says go, right? In implementation though, again, it seems to not have been polished quite well. Not only can you move around, but certain characters can enter certain stances, and some can even wave dash into the opponent. This once again creates a bit of an imbalance. If you're wave dashing or in a stance before the round even starts, it gives opportunities to perform moves milliseconds after the round starts. I don't need to explain why this is dumb. I also don't need to explain why this is dumb, but let's talk about it. Tekken 4 offers stages with walls, destructible environments, uneven floor, and are all individually beautiful with such a vibrant color palette that changes with every stage. stage, which also differ in shapes and sizes. Wall splats can allow for extra combo damage and can be tech rolled just as you would if grounded. You can also bounce off of walls to attack the opponent. Walls are a great addition and seem to work well in future Tekken installments, but here it's lacking in terms of balance. Some areas in stages allow for infinite combos, and wall splats to the side cannot be tech rolled, creating broken or infinite combo opportunities. In case you didn't pick this up, that's bad. Walls were much more balanced in later Tekken games, with the unfortunate cost of the stage design to be much blander and with less realism. The new style of stage design also introduces uneven ground in some stages like inclines and stairs. I must say, very innovative and brings Tekken 4's realism level much higher, as these stages aren't all battle arenas and are set in realistic locations. Again, another good idea in concept, but not good in execution. The uneven floor creates another balancing issue. The person on the lower ground has the ability to crouch underneath not just high attacks but most mid attacks as well. Alongside this, combos going up the incline makes impossible combos on even ground possible, giving an unfair advantage to the lower ground. If the same concept applied for all fights, this might have turned out a different way. Though I do appreciate the direction of the stages in this game. It's something that separates Tekken 4 from every other entry in the series. And yeah, while unbalanced, fights in these stages feel so fun and incomparable to any other fighting game ever due to that realism factor. Except Simpsons Wrestling. That was a masterpiece. Tekken 4 has a roster of 19 total playable characters, 10 available off the start, and 9 that can be unlocked when playing through story mode, which means that the game has less characters than Tekken 3 and 2. Disappointing in a sense, though not all bad. Tekken 4's realistic nature means that the majority of the playable characters in the game are martial artists with varying styles, meaning that you can no longer play as a devil or a kangaroo or a tree or a mailbox or a fish, I don't know, maybe a pair of shoes as well. You can't play as a pair of Nike TNs, I'm sorry. With the exception of Kuma, of course, but a Tekken without Kuma is like Street Fighter without the females having the bustiest asses imaginable. Tekken 4, of course, introduces a set of new characters. We first have Christy Montero, Eddie Gordo from Tekken 3's student. Her fighting style is almost identical to Eddie's, being Brazilian capoeira, one of the most unique fighting styles in Tekken. We then have Craig Marduk, a murderer bailed out of prison by an anonymous source. His Val Tudo move list is similar to King's wrestling style, but more no-holds-barred and aggressive, heavily inspired off of wrestling legend Bill Goldberg. Steve Fox gets introduced in this game with the most unique fighting style yet. Steve is a boxer, which means that he doesn't have any kicks in his move list. Pressing the kick buttons will make him sway and dodge out of oncoming attacks. We then have Combot, a bipedal fighting robot. Combot, like Mokujin from Tekken 3, will mimic other fighters' move lists. The creator of Combot enters this tournament as well, Violet, who has a very similar move list to someone we've seen in Tekken before. I wonder whom's that would be. We also have some returning characters who are absent from Tekken 3. We have the elegant Lee Chaolan, Heihachi's adopted son, Martial Law, now sporting a striking ripped physique and a badass mustache, and finally returning from Tekken 2 we have Tekken's very first protagonist, the now middle-aged Kazuya Mishima, with a more badass look than ever, scars all over his body, a glowing red eye, and probably a bigger cock as well. Something interesting about Tekken 4 is staple characters like Jin Kazama, Lei Wulon, and Nina Williams are now unlockable characters, which they've never been before. I want to pause for a moment and ask, why don't we see unlockable characters anymore in fighting games? It was awesome that you could put in some effort and get access to these cool locked characters, and you never really see this anymore. Why is that? Oh no, wait, you do, you just gotta pay for them! The characters in Tekken 4 are much more fleshed out than Tekken 3, both with their designs and move lists. There has been some interesting changes. First off is Jin's move list from Tekken 3 has been scrapped, and now he plays completely differently. The reason behind this is probably due to Kazuya returning with a similar move list. So in the story, since Heihachi shot and betrayed Jin in Tekken 3, Jin hated his family so much so he unlearned the Mishima Ryu karate and picked up traditional karate to further any ties to the Mishimas. That is actually really cool. Kazuya has seen a notable change as well, being his iconic electric wind god fist. Previously a launcher is now a knockdown tool, only launching on counter hit, which is dumb. I'd throw my son off a cliff too if he couldn't launch with an electric. Previously I mentioned Steve Fox's brilliant moveset, though I want to double down on that point because it's so cool to have a boxer in the mix full of mixed martial artists. All in all, each character's move list feels much more complete than before, and each new animation goes hand in hand with the smoother flow of gameplay. The move lists have also been expanded with secret just frame frame commands, like Paul's iconic Demolition Man, or Heihachi's Thunder Godfist into Just Frame Hunting Hawk. Hard to do and even harder to figure out, but broaden the expansive move list even further. Though unfortunately, I must say the roster can be rather unbalanced. It's not as unbalanced as Tekken 3 and a competitive masterpiece compared to Tekken Tag Tournament, but the game suffers from the issue of a few characters being way too strong against the rest. And it's two characters I mentioned already, Jin and Steve. Look, I'm not gonna bore you on the inner details of Tekken's competitive nature. I could tell you that they have moves that come out quicker than everyone else's, like Jin's 2-1 or Steve's 8-frame jab. I could get into the fact that Jin's Hell Sweep has no block stagger. I could talk about Steve's wall splat combos literally killing the opponent. Or I could even mention that Jin has a just frame laser scraper, which is a practically unavoidable string into mid-launcher that's fucking unblockable. I know, I could throw all this Tekken lingo at you, but to not drag this video on, for now I'd rather discuss something else about Tekken 4. So far, it hasn't been looking good for Tekken 4. Nearly every positive point I make about this game comes with a negative side effect. Let me be clear. The game is not bad so far. It's actually quite impressive, but it's flawed. Really flawed. To me, it seems that the game is a bit rushed. Every new mechanic implemented seems like it hasn't had enough time to be fleshed out. I said before that the words realistic and Tekken don't sound right together, and maybe integrating Tekken's formula with a more realistic style doesn't work. But how can Tekken 4 redeem itself? Tekken is really cheesy.
Cheese.
It's overly dramatic and stereotypically Japanese. But you can see that Tekken 4 isn't like this. Why is that? This is where I want to go in depth on that tone I mentioned earlier. The aura that Tekken 4 gives off that makes it different. I spoke about the stages already, but regardless of how they were balanced, Tekken stages have never been this good. The stages nowadays are just big flat squares or rectangles, but Tekken 4s are set in real locations, some insanely big like the airport or beach stages, and some incredibly small like the underground stage. It barely even fits two fighters in it. The colors Tekken 4 uses in its stages are also different from each other, and the music is very special. Let's compare the stages from the newer Tekkens to Tekken 4s. Notice Tekken 4's subtlety compared to the newer games. Not to say the newer Tekkens have bad music, that's false. I love the tracks from the newer Tekkens, but Tekken 4 knows how to keep it grounded. It's less dramatic and it knows how to complement the environment with atmospheric pieces. And if it needs to bump it up for the more intense stages, it knows how to do that too. Tekken 4 provides an atmosphere that knows what it wants you to feel at every moment. And it does this by, for once, not being over the top and doing the very opposite, focusing on the characters and personality. The character designs in Tekken 4 are immaculate. Tell me something, in modern Tekken, why are all the male characters completely jacked? Compare it to Tekken 4. Law is completely ripped, but he's not naturally a big guy, so he's skinny, but he's muscular. Marduk is taller and skinnier than his Tekken 7 counterpart. It makes sense, right? He's an athlete, not a bodybuilder. It's mentioned in the story that Brian is dying, and it shows with his character model. He looks weak, pale, scarred, and broken. It's all about character and personality. The win poses now include dialogue for the first time and have surprisingly detailed facial animation that's better than Tekken 7's. Check this out, the same win pose 16 years later for Kazuya is worse than when it was introduced. Characters used to win pose between rounds, but now that's been replaced with a small interval where the winner of the round will stare down the opponent as they get back to the feet, or kick dust in their direction. It's all about character and personality. The subtlety of introducing Heihachi as the final boss. I mean, we've seen him as the final boss before, but having him slowly walk to the ring wearing a simple yet intimidating fundoshi sets the scene perfectly as the game locks you in a cage with him. It's all about character and personality. Tekken 4 knows this all too well, and it's with that we get into the story. Tekken 4's story is great.
Stupid woman!
Most of the time. This is the only instance where I'll say that a fighting game story is done well across the board. How does it do this? Well, first of all is with the introduction of story mode. Story mode acts like previous games' arcade mode, where you'll fight a number of battles, beat the final boss, and your character will get a CG ending. Although this time around when you choose your character, a prologue will play where a narrator will go through a brief background of the characters and say why they chose to enter this tournament. This is done really well. The artworks this game showcases are remarkable, so dark and gritty. This only complements the stories because most are really dark and show real motivation for these characters to enter this tournament. The narrator itself adds to the creepiness here because the voice sounds oddly robotic yet human in a way, showing little emotion in its voice. I'll play a few lines from a few characters' prologues to show what I mean. Take notice of the subtle monotone of the narrator and the dark themes brought up alongside the ominous music and the gritty artworks.
Armor King was murdered. King swore upon Armor King's grave that he would seek revenge against the man responsible for his mentor's death. Brian realized that the end of his life was near. There was only one person who could change this, Dr. Abel, his creator. Day after day, Jin trained in the traditional art of karate. Ever since his betrayal by Heihachi, Jin loathed anything related to the Mishimas, his lineage, his fighting style, the devil gene in his blood, everything. Unable to cope with failure, Marshall fell into depression and spent his days at home on his couch in a drunken haze. Bitter against his peers and society, Craig's wrath consumed his soul. One day, Craig started a bar brawl in Arizona and killed an opponent during the fight. Convicted of second-degree manslaughter, Craig was sentenced to 10 years in the state penitentiary.
These are stories that anyone can easily understand or even relate to in some instances. Real ambition and emotion are shown with these characters, and it's not for stupid reasons like wanting to be the strongest in the universe or to make the traitors pay. None of that stupid shit. Whether it be revenge, power, money, a chance to prove themselves, a last resort, whatever. Real people with real ambition. Characters would sometimes cross over in their stories, where playing as different characters show a different perspective of an overarching story theme. Biggest example here is Steve, Nina, and Lei's story all crossing over, and it's only when you play each of their stories where you understand the reasoning for this. The main story does this as well. Kazuya, Heihachi, and Jin's independent story modes all start out the same, but from different perspectives, and end up in similar ways dependent on the chosen character. Only canon one being Jin's, where upon defeating his father and grandfather, a vision of his supposedly deceased mother overturns the evil consuming him. It's in these last story segments where the voice acting really shines.
わしが全てもらう。お前はここで死ぬ。お前さえいなければ、お前を倒して全てを終わらせる。
Too bad most side characters have absolutely awful voice acting. Character endings could go the comic relief route like Kuma's ending, where Heihachi tries to convince him to give back the Mishima Empire. Or Martial Law's ending, where he starts a fight in his own restaurant over the pepper beef being too damn spicy! Or the endings could go the serious route, like King confronting the murderer of his mentor while he's completely vulnerable in a hospital bed, only to see a photo of his family and not go through with killing him. Or Paul Phoenix, which I believe has the best story in this game. Paul went undefeated in the last tournament, making him the rightful winner, but very few believed him. To prove that he was the rightful winner, he'd go on and win this tournament, only to have the money and power go straight to his head, living a meaningless high-value life full of partying, alcohol, and sex. It's in his ending where he sees a dojo with a picture of him at the very front of it, and realizes he'd lost his soul to the meaningless high life, deciding in the end to give it all up and return back to his humble ways, actually giving him a proper character arc. Never has Tekken provided stories like these outside of Tekken 4. It's the only time Tekken had a story with proper writing and direction. Maybe there's a couple exceptions outside of this game, but nothing this deep. It's sad, but it makes Tekken 4 so unique in its own right. And look, these stories aren't masterpieces of any kind, but this is Tekken we're talking about here. To see proper writing is extraordinary, and it definitely makes up for the game's previous mistakes. I never expected to go so in depth on a story for a fighting game, but Tekken 4 had me viewing things differently. It sets an example that fighting game stories don't have to be cliche or just, acceptable. You can make it work. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking, but the standard doesn't have to be so low either. A fighting game doesn't have to be over the top with ridiculous effects and fast-paced action music. Instead, it can be subtle and include high-intensity music when necessary. It's a shame that the gameplay of Tekken 4 struggles with balancing new mechanics and characters. It's probably because of the negative reception with the gameplay that Tekken has been playing it quite safe since Tekken 5, being less realistic in order to preserve the gameplay for a fairer competitive environment. I wish Tekken would try and go back to the way Tekken 4 did things, but this time with more time to flesh out mechanics that didn't work in 2001. I'm not saying that Tekken 4 is better than all the other games because it's objectively and subjectively not true, but Namco was onto something here and definitely has more potential than any other game in the series. And I have nothing but respect for the ambition shown with this project, to give Tekken a realistic and more grounded flourish without going overboard. It still keeps its identity as a Tekken game. And it doesn't end there either. Just like previous games, Tekken 4 provides a variety of side modes like arcade mode, time attack, survival mode, practice mode, a new training mode which gives you a chance to learn moves with different characters. The coveted Tekken Force mode makes a grand return with a complete overhaul to its style. 4 stages that offer new challenges, branching paths, a whole bunch of personality, and a whole bunch of fun. I love this style of Tekken Force, but it's also really fucking hard. Sadly, it's not like Tekken 3 where if you played it enough times you would unlock a new character. The only thing you unlock is a new stage if you beat it once. But that doesn't matter because it does have great replay value. Then again, the whole game has great replay value. The stories are a sight to behold, and the realistic direction provides a great substitute for the much less creative Tekken direction nowadays. There's a few secret unlockable characters that act as costumes for other characters. Only other thing I wish the game did was have actual secret unlockable characters, like Tekken 3 did with Gon and Dr. Boskonovich. Nevertheless though, Tekken 4 gets a score of 74. A flawed yet ambitious project that makes up for its gameplay flaws with its creativity and the ability to stand out among other fighting games. It's a truly unique experience, one that casuals will have a lot of fun playing, one that veterans would love revisiting, but objectively it's a game with noticeable issues. To give this game a lower rating, I don't have the heart to do it. It's because of Tekken 4 that I have such a connection with these characters, a connection which other fighting games lack. The main issue nowadays is that Tekken 4 has not been preserved all that great. It's a PS2 exclusive, so aside from the console itself, the only way to play this game is through emulation. And we all know PS2 emulation can be just as painful as being thrown into a volcano. What, you've never been thrown into a volcano before? Well, let me change that. Hey guys, it's good to be back after, what is it now, 16 years? Yeah, something like that. Nah, it's good to finally make a video on this channel again. If you like what you saw, please leave a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. This is actually the second Tekken 4 review I've made because the first one I wasn't too happy with. And the script for this video was made like a year and a half ago or something like that at this point. Fuck me, it's been so long, but this video is on my bucket list and I needed to get it done, and I'm so happy that I finally have got it done. And just to be clear, I never want to quit because I know there's a few people still sticking around that really want to see content from me, and I couldn't be more thankful. Thank you so much to the few people that are still sticking around. Yous know exactly who yous are. For now, it's been Dunker. Hope to see you all soon.